Okay, good afternoon. Today we are here with the very Reverend Dr. Shelley-Ann Tenia. That's a long title.
It is.
Do you use this all the time?
Not if I don't have to.
Okay, okay. And she is the Dean and Rector of the Holy Trinity Cathedral in Fort Spring, Trinidad, in the Diocese of Trinidad and Tobago. Is all of that correct?
It is. And actually, the formal name of the cathedral is the Cathedral Church of the Holy Trinity,
Okay. Has
also known
that
as
changed?
the Cathedral.
Has that changed recently?
No, it has always been the Cathedral Church of the Holy Trinity. But that's a mouthful. So most people say either Trinity, Trinity Cathedral, or Holy Trinity Cathedral.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about yourself.
That's always a hard question. Like a little in terms of what? Professionally, personally, like.
Well, one of the things we're trying to accomplish here is to let the Anglican community get to know the people, not just the parishioners, not just the clergy, but really get to know the Anglican community. So this is your opportunity to tell us whatever you want to tell us about yourself, good or bad, things that we don't know about yourself. So this is a great opportunity.
Okie dokie. Well, with that said, let's see. Some of the things that people may not know. I did not go to Bishop Anstey High School. I, in fact, went to St. Stephen's College in Princestown. And for those of you who do not know where Princestown is, it is actually a village in the south of Trinidad, beyond Naparima, Mearo Road, or the Manahambri Road. And it's the place where St. Stephen's Church is actually. So St. Stephen's Church is in the town, and the secondary school is a few miles heading, I think that's east, but I might be wrong. I'm bad with directions. That's the other thing that people may not know about me. I am really terrible. I like to say I'm directionally challenged. So whenever I have to go anywhere, and I love to go around the diocese, whether it be preaching or helping with services or whatever, I'm always game for an adventure. But I always give myself late time because I'm directionally challenged and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get lost. And I'm okay with that. Like, I'm cool because I've discovered many a place because I've gotten lost and have to find my way back. So, yeah.
Where's the furthest place you've gone and gotten lost?
The furthest place I've gone and gotten lost. That's maybe, oh, that's a good question.
Toko?
Maybe, but I don't think I got lost. I think I was going to a home to give communion to somebody in Diego Martin. And I totally missed the turnoff because the person said to me to look for a particular thing, and that road did not have a sign. And I am pretty exact when you give me directions. So if you mean a major road, but there are actually two side roads before the major road, and you tell me turn on the first left, I will turn on the first left, even if it's a small road, right? Because you tell me the first left. So I missed the turn, and I ended up all the way kind of at the end of Diego Martin by the sporting complex by Rich Plain, all the way up in the back there, kind of driving until the streets got so narrow that they were like one way, one car passing at a time. And I said to myself, clearly I am in the wrong place. Yeah. So it wasn't as far as Toko, but I went much further than where I should have been actually in terms of distance. But at least I got to see the end of Diego Martin, and to the point where you know, there are footpaths and people just kind of walk up the track. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so that was an adventure in a car.
It was. And I got to see some of those parts of Diego Martin that I wouldn't otherwise see because I don't have parishioners there really. So it was good. I learned something. I learned a few places as well. So, I mean, there's that. I would have lived, which people may not be aware of. I would have lived for, oh gosh, could have been maybe 10 years consecutively in the United States, and then kind of continued on and off for another maybe 3-5 years. So that I kind of occupy two spaces in that sense. And so I spent a large amount of time in Southern Virginia, in the US. And so that's where I would have gone to college, gone to seminary, in that space. What else might people not know? I come from a very large family, actually. Huge on both sides. My dad was one of 10, my mother is one of 8. And I have some long living genes on my mother's side of the family, because my grandmother is still alive, and her sister, who is 96, is still alive. So if I got any of those genes, I may be around for a little while. But I grew up with all of my aunts and uncles and cousins, and yeah, that was fun. And I always say that God prepared me for ministry by putting me in that family, and for life, really. Because how I manage life and manage people is I think about my family, and I am bound to encounter some personality like somebody in my family. And once I can peg the person, I'm good. Because
okay.
I know how to deal with all my family members, right? So I know all of them, I know their personalities, I know what they like, I know how they behave, and I know how to respond. So once I could figure out kind of who the person is like, I'm good, because I know what to do and how to respond, and I'm cool. So
Okay.
I'm grateful to God for that, because in ministry I sure meet a whole bunch of all God's people. So
So you are from the south of Trinidad, then, not
I
Port of
am.
Spain. Okay.
Correct, is right. Yeah, I started that way because I think for many people, because since I've been back to the diocese, I've only been in Port of Spain. So my first assignment was actually in Barbados, and then I was assigned to the cathedral, actually, as my first cure as a curate, not as a person in charge, just as the assistant curate. And then moved to All Saints, and then Holy Savior as the rector. So I've only been in the north of Trinidad since I've been back in the diocese, but I am actually from South, born, raised, bred, and proud of the same. So yeah, that's me. I love life. I love what I do. I love to sing. I like to sing and dance.
Really? Let's talk a little bit about that.
I'm a movement kind of person, right? So I like to sing and dance. So
you like to sing?
Yeah. Listen, I always say, the Bible says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord. That's one. And two, everybody can sing. Now, we may have to debate about the quality of the sound that the person is making while they sing.
True.
But it doesn't mean that they don't sing. And one can love to sing and not necessarily have great tonal quality.
Okay, well, great. Go ahead.
I was just saying, and I like tea.
Oh, okay. All types of tea?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So where did you work before you went into the priesthood, or are you presently working somewhere else beside being a priest?
So I do ministry full time. The only other what I like to call side gigs I have is I offer counseling therapeutic services, and I from time to time may do personal development workshops. I spent I only stopped in the last 5 years, actually. I spent a considerable amount of time working with the Franciscan Institute when I came back to the diocese. So I was doing that alongside priesting. And so from time to time, I do things with them. But full-time cleric. I don't think I would have space for any other thing that is kind of full-time traditional work. But before becoming a priest, I worked in a variety of settings, doing a variety of things.
Okay, so let's hear about that.
So interestingly enough, my kind of first job was in IGL, Industrial Gases Limited. I was a clerk there, doing whatever I was assigned on any given day. And then I worked as a cashier in a grocery store, and loved that. And it was one of those grocery stores that's like Massey stores that has a whole bunch of different departments. So I kind of worked as a cashier, I worked as a CSR, I worked as a stocker. It was actually pretty cool because I got
a CSR?
A customer service representative. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I did a range of things with that in that company, and worked there for I can't even tell you. Could be a good 7 years, maybe.
Wow.
5 to and I worked there, and yes, some of these were happening simultaneously, right? That's what you do when you're in college and you have to get some extra money for spending and other things, right? That's just life. So I worked in the grocery store. I also worked as a house manager for a nonprofit called the Dwelling Place. It was a homeless family shelter, so a shelter for homeless families. And I worked there for, could be a good 5 years, I think. Yeah, it became kind of one of my steady places, and it was fortunate for me because it was the kind of employment that was directly related to my degree program, which was great. So I got a lot of hands-on experience. And I started there actually as a volunteer. So I didn't start off working there, but I am a member of an academic honor society, and that Dwelling Place was actually one of the community service places that they would go to. So I started there as a volunteer working with children, and then they ended up having an opening, and I applied and I got the job, and I just kind of stayed with the job for the entire time that I was in college. And then when I needed work after college, I just continued working with them. So that was that. I also worked, which I absolutely delighted in doing. I worked at the Chrysler Museum of Art, and I worked in their gift shop.
Really?
Yes, I worked there for about a year and a half. I worked there just before I went to seminary, actually. And that was a fun job. I mean, it really was fun. Aside from having access to the museum, my supervisor was just a hoot. She was delightful. And I learned a lot about aside from art, just kind of about stock, because we did all the inventory, and she would catalog to determine what kinds of merchandise to sell. So I got exposed to that side of life, which was very interesting, actually. So I did that, had that experience. I also worked for an urban planning organization called the Planning Council of Norfolk. And so a lot of their work was around ensuring that people had affordable housing, especially in communities where there may have been transitions and new development. And so I did that as well, which was actually quite insightful because I learned how to do credit reports and all those kinds of things. And one of the things I learned to do as well while I worked at the Dwelling Place, which was the homeless shelter, is I learned the dynamics of trauma and families who are going through trauma because of homelessness and a variety of other things.
Right.
Also learned how to administer drug tests.
Really?
Yes. Because the rule was that you could not be using drugs while at the Dwelling Place. And so any people persons who had a history or we were concerned about, we did random drug tests. And so I learned how to do drug tests, which was pretty cool too. So I worked at the planning council, got some good experience there. And I think this is my final job at this point, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I worked as a youth minister in a small parish in Norfolk called St. Peter's. And so I served as their part-time youth minister for, again, about a year and a half. So yeah, that's been work. That's all the work I did before becoming a priest. I actually did all of that work before going to seminary, because when I got to seminary, I worked on campus.
Oh, really?
I did. I had to. I mean, you have to pay for school. School doesn't pay for itself.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. So on campus, I actually worked at the switchboard, which I enjoyed. I worked at the library. The seminary I attended had two libraries. There was the main library, and then there was a library called the Center for the Ministry of Teaching, specialized in Christian formation matters. And so I worked at that library, which was also a gift in many ways. And I was wait staff. So the company that did the meals at the seminary often would get events. So they may have been seminary events, or the high school next door would have events, and they would always need wait staff. And seminarians were allowed to do wait staff to get extra cash. And so I did the wait staff. Okay. And that was also interesting because I got to meet all kinds of people, right, sharing out wine and distributing hors d'oeuvres.
Really?
Yeah.
So if my geography is correct, I guess you said Norfolk and the seminary, all these places are in Virginia?
Yes. So I spent most of my time when I lived in the US in Virginia, part in Northern Virginia and part in Southern Virginia. Virginia is a huge state, actually. So seminary was in Northern Virginia, which is actually just like 10 minutes away from Washington, D.C. So I got there pretty often. Mm-hmm. And then Southern Virginia is kind of coastal, naval city. So yeah.
Okay.
Northern Virginia Beach is, I mean, that whole, what they call the Tidewater, Hampton Roads area is a naval area. So you have people in the Navy, some folks in Coast Guard. And so you always run into military folk in that area just because it's where bases are located. So.
Okay, so I guess you have a lot of military friends?
I have a few, not a lot, but a few. Mm-hmm.
So who inspired you to become a priest?
Who inspired me to become a priest? Lord, that's a loaded question. I don't know if there was a who in particular. My going to seminary, let me start over, because going to seminary and being a priest are two different things. So the being a priest thing came later. That was kind of at the end of the road. Being a priest was never on my agenda, never on my radar. There were two persons in my life who kept saying to me that they thought I should consider ministry as an option for career vocation. Really? And there were two people. The chaplain at the Episcopal Campus Ministry at Old Dominion University, Reverend David LaSalle, and my first spiritual director, whose name is Catherine Swan. Those two people kept prompting me all the time, but I really wasn't taking them on because I had a plan. So,
what was that plan?
That plan was to become a licensed clinical social worker and have my own practice helping families in communities. That was my plan.
Okay.
So they just kept prompting, but getting to seminary was, I think, a matter of opportunity and timing. And that just lined itself up in a way that I would never have been able to orchestrate on my own. And I give thanks for the Diocese of Long Island because at the point in time when I was applying for seminary, that diocese actually happened to have a scholarship that they gave to Black students from the diaspora, and the Bishop Walker Scholarship, and I happened to get that scholarship, which assisted. And so the timing around my ending college, taking a year and returning, things just lined up in terms of timing and other matters around getting to seminary. And again, my spiritual director, Catherine Swan, I call her Kaki, she was persistent. So she signed me up for Virginia Seminary's prospective student weekend. And when I was finished with the weekend, I had a clear sense that I was supposed to be at seminary.
Wow.
Even though I went objecting, I mean, I went with great resistance, and I was sure that I was not going to have a good time and that this would not be for me. So I drove up the road, made up my mind. I would spend probably half the time and return and say to how I went, that's not for me. And that's not what happened. Because every objection I had, every reason I thought that would not make sense, God put me in a situation to say, okay, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. So, I thought I would be absolutely bored stiff out of my mind. The only thing that was true was that I thought I would be the only Black girl there, because that was my experience in many of the places I was in. And that remained consistent. But the thing is, I wasn't the only Black girl there, actually. There were a ton of people of color that particular weekend, ironically. Mm-hmm. One. I also thought that I wouldn't be able to manage the classes, and I would be bored stiff out of my mind, and I wouldn't be interested. And while I was waiting on my host, she put me to sit in a Hebrew class. And as soon as the lecturer started talking, I was absolutely fascinated by not only his teaching style, but just the Hebrew language. I was like, wow, he's writing on the other side of the board. Like, what is happening? I was totally fascinated and absolutely enjoyed the class. And when I caught myself enjoying the class, I was like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be enjoying yourself. You need to stop. And then my next thing was seminaries for old people. Like, is only old people do this? After, you've worked, and then, you done one career, then you decide that you're going to do this. And I was like, I can't manage being around old people all the time. I have to have a life.
So why did you get that impression that old people wasn't?
Because all the people that I had known were old people. Okay. I'd never been a young cleric in my life, really. And so my idea of seminary was for old people, or for people who really nerdy, to be very honest. And who just sanctified and sanctimonious. So that's what in my head.
So neither of those two things apply to you?
None of those. Sanctimonious, no. Holy looking and respectful, not necessarily all the time. Okay. And so by the time I was done with the weekend, so they split us up into small groups on the Saturday night so that we could have dinner in a faculty member's home. And the faculty member that I got sent to was a faculty member who spent many years in, I think, one of the African countries. I think it might have been Uganda or one of them. Mm-hmm. And of the 12 people that she hosted for dinner, I was one of about 8 to 10 people who were under the age of 30. I was like, really, God? Because I thought it would just be a set of old people. Mm-hmm. I ended up with a bunch of young people, and ironically, the majority of the young people I met that weekend who were looking at the school as possibilities, mm-hmm. the majority of them ended up in my class, actually.
So all of this was God working his miracle. It had nothing. I
didn't say that then. That is my story now. Okay. Hindsight is always 2020, but that is what that was. So that was seminary. Priesthood came after, because really and truly, the truth is, the figuring out whether I'd be a priest or not was an evolution, because the reality was I hadn't met very many female clerics up to that point, because I would have grown up in Trinidad and there would have been no female priests. I mean, the first person to be ordained to the priesthood in Trinidad, I think, was ordained in 2000.
First female.
Yes, to be
Okay.
ordained a priest was in 2000. So I hadn't met very many, if any. I hadn't met any, actually. The only female clerics I had met would have been the ones I would have met while living in the United States. So yeah. So no, being a priest was not always on my agenda. And that inspiration came from a variety of different places in a variety of different ways.
Oh, great. And how has this worked out for you?
Fabulously well, actually. I'm having a good time.
Okay. No surprises?
Lots of surprises. But what I say to folks all the time is that exactly what I wanted to do, I get to do. Plus, I get to do the other thing that I absolutely love, which is to talk about God. And if I had become a licensed clinical social worker, I would not necessarily have been able to talk about God as freely as I do as a priest. People expect me to talk about God.
Right.
Yeah. And so I get to do everything that I love and I enjoy, including dancing and singing, and working with families and working in communities, and not having to be behind a desk 9 to 5. It's actually a win-win situation all the way around.
Okay, great. So let's turn it to a different direction. What's your favorite pastime?
My favorite pastime, I would have to say, is being in nature. In a phrase, being in the bush. Like just going out. I'm serious, going out where there are trees and the sea, and I can just I could spend forever time there in that space. Yeah, kind of hanging out.
So did you come from deep south and you used to spend time in the bush?
Well, I don't know. That's a hard question. We spent lots of time in La Brea, which is where my dad's family is. And so there is that. But I just like nature, and it's like outside, and I like being in nature actually. So that would probably be one of my favorite things. Outside of that, reading. And when I get a chance, if I ever get a chance, just kind of hanging out with friends. And that could include dancing, because I really like to dance. But just hanging out with friends. Yeah, those would be my favorite things to do, I think.
Well, I've heard you say dancing quite a few times, so it seems like that is really something you like, but you don't get a chance to do it a lot of times.
I really don't, but I do enjoy dancing, actually. It is my preferred movement and activity.
So is that why you do some of your services outside? Every opportunity you get to do the services outside of the cathedral?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so now we know. Okay. So how has
to connect with God, actually?
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I hear the birds a lot when you are out there, and you know the melodious singing, so you get to sing also with the birds.
Correct.
How has this pandemic affected you personally, and do you think it has affected your congregation?
I think personally, the pandemic has allowed me to slow down, and I really kind of needed to slow down. I've been operating on two extremes, really. Go faster. That's just been what has been happening, and I think I really just needed to stop. So the pandemic actually allowed for that, and it allowed for me to spend a lot of time just in processing through a number of things and spending some time with God quietly around those things, both personally and professionally. And so I have actually been quite grateful for the pandemic, to be honest. While it's been many of the things that we've said, both inconvenient and scary and all the rest of it, for me, it has been in many ways a gift for which I am grateful. I think my congregation, like many other congregations, have struggled with the pandemic. I think people are experiencing loneliness, they're experiencing the confusion and agitation and all the other things that come with life being unpredictable and being cut off of their routine. I think people are really struggling with the absence of human contact.
Yes.
We get to see that we really are kind of gregarious um, people that like to connect. I think people are really struggling with that. And I also think people are struggling with their understanding of what church is and means. Because for many people, coming to church was a social activity, it was familiar, and that's what church meant.
Right. Right.
And so they've had to think about being church and doing church not in a building. And I think for many people that's different. For some, it's very scary. I think for others, it's kind of like, oh, great, I get to stay home and I don't have to feel guilty. You know, it's like
Yeah.
I can worship comfortably in my home and I don't have to feel bad about it.
Mhm.
You know?
And it
So
could have some psychological toll on some people.
yeah, it is.
Yes. Especially
Most,
where they can't have that human contact, can't
yeah,
move as freely as they wanted to. So,
yeah,
yeah.
I think a lot of anxiety and a number of other things. And a lot of fatigue because, I mean, some people have shifted to doing more online things. And that's very tiring. And I don't think people understand how much more tiring that could be than doing in-person things just because of how our bodies and our brains are wired. We do a lot less work when we're in person because when we're in
Right.
person, we can use all of our senses and look for cues and sort out for ourselves very easily where we are, if we're safe, what's going on, and what meaning to make of what's happening. When you're online, you don't have all of those cues. So your brain is working twice as hard because you don't have the usual things that help, you know. So it's all of that. And I think people are, and most people don't have the language or the words for all of that. They just know that they want the pandemic to be over.
And then we have that part of the community too that does not get online because it's an older community and they might have some even more challenges because of the pandemic.
But you know what I found interesting? I have encountered a number of older folks who
With
were
young people.
willing to learn. They were allowing their grandchildren to help them. You know, they wanted to be connected, and I was actually pleasantly surprised and amazed at that. The number of older persons who were willing to try.
Yes.
That was great.
Recently, I encountered a 92-year-old lady and she was given a smartphone and she's willing to learn the smartphone so she can get online also. I was a little surprised, but she's willing and she asked me if I can give her assistance. So I'm working with her also to do that. One thing you said that was very surprising to me that it offered you an opportunity to slow down. And can you explain that in light of the fact that you were doing 4 services a day? I don't know how you incorporated slowing down with 4 services a day. So kind of explain that to us.
So Okay. So what people may not realize, I suppose I do it so instinctively that folks don't realize it, that before COVID, um, I was often moving from a service to a meeting, to a school, to a meeting, to a school, to another meeting, to pastoral appointments. Yeah. I was constantly moving from one thing to the next in different locations. So it's either the church to the office to the diocesan office, the diocesan office to some. I was always kind of on the road, going to another place, doing something else. Because that's the nature of the work, going to Oxford Street Home, walking over to the schools, whatever. With the pandemic, there was none of that.
Okay.
I can count on one hand the number of times I drove. Because the other thing was doing funerals. And when I do a funeral, I do prayers before the funeral. I do going to the cemetery with the family. And I also do prayers, if it's not 9 days yet before the funeral, the 9 days prayers, and then I do 40 days prayers. So it meant always being at somebody's home as well, right? So when the pandemic came, there was no more driving. I actually left my apartment, went down to the cathedral, and stayed in the apartment at the cathedral for the entire time.
So you relocated?
Basically, for 3 months. I could count on the number of times I drove while the pandemic was happening. I mean, while the intensity of the height of the pandemic in the 3 months, because I didn't have to go all over the place. And not having to drive and to be in 100 different locations at different times, sometimes on the same day, reduced a large amount of one, stress and time. Because a lot of that driving or walking, because I didn't drive in Port of Spain, I would walk to schools and that kind of thing, cut down the amount of time that I was sitting in traffic or sitting on the road or otherwise, right? So while doing the services online took time, those are the things that are actually easy for me because I love them, and I've been doing them so much that the liturgy is kind of in me. And so what it allowed me to be able to do is to do some different things, do some planning, and doing the office, the morning prayer, evening prayer, noonday prayer, is different from doing a Eucharist. They're shorter, they require fewer, there are fewer elements to manage. And I am also not managing a whole congregation of people one after the other. You see what I'm saying? So there's lots of space on when there are services. So the cathedral would usually have services every morning. I didn't do every morning service, but I did probably 3 of the days of the week. And when the other persons assigned could not do a day, I was the cover. And on some days there were 2 services. And on Sundays, services happen back to back. So you have 6 and 8, and if we had a special service, it would be at about 10 or 11. So the time between activities became more, so that the time between 6:30 and 12 o'clock, I could actually sit and have breakfast and not have to worry about going to our next meeting and have to drive to the next meeting to get there on time. You know what I mean? And I didn't have to worry either about beating the morning traffic to get into Port of Spain and then waiting out the day to get out back home out of the evening traffic. So all of that got eliminated. And so I had more time.
I completely understand that because working and driving for your work takes up about half of your day, I would say, just driving and being in traffic and trying to navigate before the rush hour or after the rush hour. So I completely understand. You actually got time back to yourself.
That's correct. And I actually was better able to manage how I treated with meetings, because even though there were meetings and those meetings were still happening online, the beauty of Zoom was people had to get real focused because you started off with 40 minutes for most things.
Yes.
Right? So that helped.
Right.
And I'll be very honest, when meetings were going on and on and on, when you're in an in-person meeting, you cannot hit mute or turn off your camera. You can't exit. Yeah, in the same way.
Yes.
Online, you can mute and turn off your camera.
And you can turn off your camera and have your breakfast and your lunch and some of those other things, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's have a little comic relief. Let's change it a little bit. I will tell you one word and I will say something and tell me the first word that comes to you. Okay?
Sure.
Makeup.
Unnecessary.
Hair.
Time consuming.
Okay. Family.
I love them.
Pet peeve.
Ignorance.
Really? Punctuality.
Important.
First history lesson.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Friends, family, school.
First history lesson.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard one. Like, my first history lesson would have been like when I was small, talking to my grandfather, one of the either of them, because they were always full of history lessons, or talking to my father, who cut out newspaper clippings and was always full of information about things that happened, as he used to like to say, just the other day, and he was talking about 20 years ago. So yeah, that one's a hard one.
So that answer would be men. Because apparently it's all the men in your life, your grandfathers, your father, all those history lessons that you got from them.
I suppose, yeah.
Okay. Friends?
Few. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what would you like to see in your church, the Anglican community, or in the country today?
What I would like to see, that's like big.
I know. So I know you did Pracy in school, so I think you can break that down for us.
I think what I'd like to see in the church is that we become a community that's Christ-led and Holy Spirit filled. Like, I would like us to actually want to be like Jesus. Like, I actually take the things that Jesus said seriously, and I actually believe that they're possible. And I think the church is responsible for making real the things that Jesus said. I really do believe that. And so my hope for the church is that we will be just that. The word church actually is from that Greek word ecclesia, which means a people called out. And I really hope that we can become just that, a people who understand that we are called out to be in the world. We're not supposed to be in the building. The building is really like going to the gas station. Most people don't live in the gas station. You don't spend your life in the gas station. You're going to the gas station, you get gas and you leave.
Right.
And you drive your car, and then when you need gas, you go back. And the church really should be that place where we come to get gassed up to go back out. So we spend more time on the road than in the gas station.
Okay, I understand.
And so that's my hope for the church. My hope for the church in the province and our diocese is that we become more connected, not just with the Anglican Communion and all the work that's happening around the communion, but that we become more present and available and relevant in our own nation, actually. Because I really do think we have a responsibility to exercise moral leadership in the context of our nation and around the world, everywhere it's located. And I also frankly think that the part of the leadership that is absolutely necessary for us is the dismantling, decoding, and disrupting of the legacy of colonialism. I think post-colonial leadership is our responsibility as church. We contributed to the mess that we're in, and we should be responsible for leading in fixing, actually. I think that's our responsibility. So when we talk about the process of reconciliation, there's an aspect that we often leave out that makes it empty. And that is the part of restitution. How do we make it right? So somebody has been hurt. We want forgiveness. We want things to be restored and so on. But that process requires restitution. That is the making it right part. I think our leadership in the transformation and the dismantling of the colonial things and demonstrating the alternative is our work of restitution. That's how we will make it right, by demonstrating that there is a different way. There are new models of governance and relating and leadership. And enacting those things faithfully and consistently and intentionally, actually. And that's what I hope to see. In one of the services this week, I made the point that we can't carry the name of Christ if we in any way participate in the things that we have been seeing all week.
Right.
They're inconsistent. They're absolutely inconsistent. And there's absolutely no justification. None. There's none. And there's no justification from a spiritual and theological perspective. And for folks like myself who are children of the Republic, so we have no clue what life was like before 1976. No clue, except from the stories we hear from our families. We have an added responsibility as well, because we are benefiting from the hard work and the sacrifice of the generations before us as well. We are children of privilege in many, many ways. And in my own case, and I recognize that I and those like me don't make up the majority of the society, but we're a significant enough portion to have critical mass and influence. And that is, we have the blood of the various ancestors running in our veins. We do. I know I do. And I know there are many others with all kinds of different configurations. Right. Those with Syrian and Chinese and other kinds of configurations that exist. And so which side of our family or which part of our ancestry we're going to deny, reject, trample upon if we participate in what is happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah? So, can't be okay. So just on those two scores, it can't be okay. And I mean, the list is long. So that's my hope, that we will stop being silent and that we will really and intentionally do the work. And the work can't happen in one direction. It has to happen systemically on the macro level, but it also has to happen on the ground, on the micro level, in homes, in communities, in churches, on the ground. The work has to happen from both ends. Yes? And it's critical and essential work. And that's really what I would love to see for more and more of us to get into, to be in the conversation so that we can change the narrative. And as we change the narrative, to also change the behavior, because the narrative is not enough. Behavior needs to change. Attitudes need to change. Yeah.
Well, on that note, I don't think I have anything else to ask you, because right now you have left us with a lot to think about and a lot to do. And we have a lot of work to do.
We do. We have work for the next, a good 25, 30 years.
Yes, or maybe more.
More, definitely
Yes.
more. I mean, at the end of the day, if we intend really to make a difference, it's the forming and empowering of the leaders that are with us. And when I say the empowering of leaders, I'm talking about our young adults, and those who are entering into spaces where decision making is happening,
Right.
and can represent. And I'm also talking about children, because the children who are born and are being raised up,
Right.
they have to see what is different so that they cannot continue to marinate in what we don't want.
Exactly.
So that the forming of leaders has to happen as we raise up and change some of our norms and the cultural dynamics, so that our children are raised in a different way. And also in the forming of leaders who will influence and make policy and contribute as well.
So that sounds like when I was growing up, they say it takes a village to raise a child.
No, it takes a village to do everything. It takes a village to raise a child, to live well, to recover from illness. It takes a village for everything.
Yes.
Anything that is worth having, doing, or being, it takes a village to have happen and to be sustained. Anybody who thinks they can do it on their own is, yeah. I don't have the word, but it at that point, any person who thinks they can do it on their own is basically seeking to treat other people like they're objects. So I will use you for what I want and move on.
Right.
That's not how we're called to live. Yeah. So we need each other.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I want to thank you so very much, the very Reverend Dr. Shelley-Ann Tenia from the Holy Trinity Cathedral.
Shelley-Ann is good.
Shelley-Ann Tenia.
That's what God calls me.
Okay. I want to thank you for taking the time to spend with us and actually letting the people get to know a little about you. So with that, we say bye-bye and thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay. And blessings to you.
Yeah, to you as well.